Hello, and welcome back to the Divorce and Money podcast. Today, I am joined by Gerard Zielinski. He is a certified divorce financial analyst who specializes in dividing retirement assets during divorce. Gerard works with Smarter Divorce Solutions in Wisconsin. He has extensive experience helping individuals avoid costly mistakes when splitting retirement accounts. Today, we're diving into the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of dividing retirement assets, the pitfalls people overlook, and how seemingly small details can turn into big financial headaches down the road. Let's get into our conversation. Marriage is about love. Divorce is about money. Without the right guidance, critical mistakes can have lasting financial consequences. That is where I come in. My name is Gabriela Martinelli, founder at Ever After Wealth. As a certified divorce financial analyst, I provide my clients financial clarity, strategic divorce planning, and long-term stability. On this podcast, I am sharing what you need to know about getting through a divorce, protecting your legacy, growing your wealth and assets post-divorce, and figuring it out what you really want in this next stage of life. Let's get started. Well, hello, Gerard. Welcome to the Divorce and Money podcast. I'm excited to have you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I just kind of told our audience what is that you do, but how about you tell us a little bit in your own words? What's your work? What do you do? What's your role within the divorce world?
Sure. So like yourself, I'm a certified divorce financial analyst, a CDFA. But I kind of found a niche in this industry, and for the last 20 years, I've been working with attorneys and clients that are going through the divorce process, and really focused on valuing pensions, dividing pensions, and more so education, and educating folks on those options that they have when they need to divide or value those pensions, and focusing on the issues in valuing pensions as well.
So you decided to do the fun stuff, valuating pensions, dividing retirement accounts that we don't really like to do. Most of us don't really like to dive into that because it's very complicated, right?
We like numbers. Yeah.
I know, but it's just, I think that there is a misconception when it comes to the retirement accounts or the pensions. People tend to believe that they're very easy or they're very simple. And I do think that some of them may be not as complicated, but I do believe that there's nothing simple about them. And that gets me to the next point, which is those things don't get done automatically. And let's talk a little bit about how confusing it is sometimes for individuals, right? When they go through this whole process, they go through mediation or they go to court and they go through a trial and there's a court order that says, okay, we're going to divide this pension, we're going to divide this retirement account, equals part, whatever it is, and that's it. And is so interesting because a lot of individuals believe that that is it, and that somehow that is going to happen without anyone taking any further action. And I have seen people coming to me 6 months after the fact, and I'm like, well, I was supposed to get this money and I don't know. And unfortunately, attorneys don't like to handle quadros or divide pensions or divide retirement accounts. It's very complicated. I worked for attorneys for 16 years, and I'll tell you, they don't want to do this. And I think the reason is because it's really complicated, right? So in an ideal world, what would happen? An individual goes through this process, they get a separation agreement. You know, some states, they operate under separation agreements only. Some of them had to be filed with the court and get a court order. Somebody goes through a divorce, they go through a trial, and then they get this order that says, okay, we're dividing this retirement account. So ideally, what would be the immediate action after that is happened? Like you got that court order, you got the separation agreement signed. What is the step that people are missing when it comes to that?
Yeah, and I think you could even take it a step back, even further, even
Oh,
before the separation agreement, because I think the biggest thing to kind of understand is there are differences in these plans from plan to plan. You can lump two 401ks into the same bucket, but there are little different nuances and intricacies between 401ks, between pensions, IRAs, you throw those in there, brokerage accounts. You think about all the investment or retirement assets that are out there. There are differences in how those pension plans are paid, how those 401ks are paid out. There's differences in the terms and conditions on how they can be divided. There's just, you know, understanding those differences will go a long way. And I tell this to attorneys, I tell this to my clients all the time. The first step, even before you draft your decrees, before you put anything in writing, before you even know you would need to divide these accounts, you need to do the discovery. You need to do the valuations. You need to do all of the grunt work, right? To understand these terms and conditions, to then get that into your decree, right? I mean, I would tell you that's the first step, and that's where we see most of the financial errors and mistakes and everything that would go wrong. We can trace it back to the decree 100% of the time because there's usually a lack of understanding, a lack of language, a lack of detail when it comes to dividing these assets in the decree. And that's what I'm out there doing. I'm out there educating people. Not only I'm just not sitting there drafting quadros and performing pension valuations and throwing reports around. I'm educating folks on these things and in terms of what can and can't be done. What are the payout options? What are you looking at later on so the mistakes aren't made, right? And that's what I'm telling attorneys. We got to get these things into the decree first before we can draft a quadro.
And I think, and yes, and that this is why you are the expert on retirement accounts, because I didn't think that further. But I find in my experience, there is a lot of resistance, especially from the attorneys, to hear us out. Like to actually, I actually am working with a case. We are going to mediation, and there is a pension going on, and I have no information about this pension. And all I keep getting from the other side is that screenshot that says, this is what your monthly benefit will be. Somewhere in that screenshot, there's something about an annuity. It says something annuity. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this means. I can't get this value, right? And of course, the attorneys are, well, the best way to do it is just divide it. Let's put in there that it's going to be split 50-50. And that way we don't worry about the value. And I'm like, what if you can't? What if you can't divide it? What if the language in your agreement or your degree doesn't allow for the plan to divide it? And they
And
still
there
don't
are
want to hear me.
No, there are,
Yeah.
pension plans out there. A lot of them are county and state specific. Not a lot of state plans can't be divided, but certainly when you get into the specific county pension plans, police, firefighters, there are specific counties out there and city pension plans that won't divide them by quadro, meaning they will not pay an alternate payee. They will not pay a former spouse directly, no matter what kind of court order you give them. And so there are all kinds of errors that we'll see in divorce decrees, right? I'll get divorce decrees that ask for a $500,000 lump sum from this pension plan. Well, the pension plan pays out in the form of a monthly benefit. It pays out $3,000 a month. There's no way we can get $500,000 out of that pension plan, but that'll be written right into the decree. And now, yes, they've got issues. They're going back to the drawing board. They weren't done. The decree put them in a position to have more work to do, more negotiations, more litigation. Not to mention they awarded something that just couldn't be done, but they also forgot a lot about the other issues with pension plans. I don't want to call them issues, but terms and conditions. What about survivor benefits? What happens to these pension payments when somebody dies? They weren't even thinking about those things because they awarded a $500,000 lump sum, right? So you've got a lot of issues there, and we see it all the time. The
Yeah.
knowing and understanding the difference between a pension and a 401k, that'll go a long way just right off the bat.
Yes, and I think that in our world, if I'm talking to an attorney that doesn't want to hear me, then the individual, usually our client, is in a very bad place, because on one you have the financial expert telling you that this is an issue, it's going to be a problem, and then you have the attorney saying, no, it's not an issue. I've done this all the time. And the problem is that I don't think it comes back to them. And that is the issue sometimes. It's been 2-3 years and you figured out that, yeah, there's nothing you can do here. You will need to reopen the case, and it takes something a little extreme to get it done. But at that time also, right? If you're dealing with a pension is bad enough, right? Pensions usually are there, but retirement accounts also may disappear. The money may be transferred. Like there's a lot of things happening, right? Because until the financial institution doesn't receive a letter that say, hey, there's a quadro coming, there's no restrictions on an account, right? And that happens. I had personally a case that I saw that coming, it was going to be a problem. I reviewed the language on the agreement and I said, this is going to come back to you. It's going to be a problem. It's not going to work. And she went to the attorney. The attorney said, it's going to work. I do this every time. I said, okay, fine. 7 months later, the client calls me and said, you were right. And now they are spending a lot of money trying to fix the error that could have been fixed very easily if we have just pay attention to that, right? Um, why is that you think attorneys are so afraid of the financial side of things? It would seem to me that they should want to make this right for their clients. Sometimes you're talking a lot of money. Like you just said, 500,000, are you kidding? That is a lot of money out of a settlement that someone may not ever get or spend a lot of money to get.
I think the differences in these plans are just too daunting for folks that aren't numbers folk, right? If you're not ingrained in what retirement accounts do and how they function and taxes, and if you're not ingrained in that sort of thing, it's a little bit daunting when you get into the terms and conditions. And it's very easy just to say, let's divide everything in half and wipe our hands of everything after the divorce is over. I think it does take someone to come back with a real issue, with a financial loss as a result of what was happening in their decree, to really get that light bulb to go on. And I would tell you, 95% of these decrees that we see with erroneous language, bad language, whatever you want to call it, 95% of them, the quadro gets done. These things get divided eventually, whether it's 1 month later, 1 year later, or 10 years later. These things get done, and everybody just keeps moving. We don't stop and go back. And unless there's a significant financial loss, we're not looking to blame anybody. We're not looking, we're looking to wipe our hands of this divorce process as well and move on, right? And so that's a lot of times what's happening. The tax effects are getting overlooked. When we can collect these pension payments are getting overlooked. Oh, I didn't know I can't collect my pension until he starts collecting his pension at age 65. And, these folks are 45 years old and they're expecting some sort of payment from these pension plans at that point when they get divorced, right? There's a lot of things that, need to be understood, so that you have happy clients post divorce, right? So they're not asking questions. They're not looking to blame somebody. And worst of all, they're not looking for a malpractice claim at the end of the day when survivor benefits aren't awarded and the participant dies. That's when things really come to fruition. It could be 20 years later,
Yeah,
and you're looking at no survivor benefits in this quadro, no survivor benefits in the decree. The participant dies and all payments stop from that pension plan. It's a big surprise. Now who do we blame? Right now, where are we looking at that point?
right.
So,
Yeah,
I'm involved in a couple of malpractice cases just like that now. But again, these are coming
yeah,
from 20 years ago, right? Not something
right,
I did or anything, but they're coming from
right.
attorneys 20 years ago that didn't button up the decree.
Right. And I think there is probably a little bit more information now, and we're trying to push it, but I think it will take a lot, like you said, education. I think that is really needed. And the fact as a CDFA, our biggest challenge sometimes is to get the documents. Give me the documents. Like I need to see the plan documents. I need to see how that's going to pan out, because you don't want to go through this process and say, yeah, we're going to divide it 50-50, and then you can't, or there's other restrictions, or it won't happen. I remember working with a client a few years ago, and there was a pension plan. It was a very weird pension plan. It wasn't state or anything. It was a company that had like a pension plan. They didn't have it anymore, but he worked for the company for like 40 years, right? As I'm reading this plan documents that I got my hands on, it very specifically said that pension and the payment could not be divided because of a divorce, because of anything. It actually has all the specific quadros don't apply. Like it was like this big paragraph. And I thought, oh, wow. Okay. So then now we have an issue right here, right? Because if somebody doesn't read this paragraph and then you go, and I think it's very hard sometimes, and even for the attorneys to understand, just because you have a court order that says, and a judge said, oh, we're dividing this, they don't have jurisdiction within a plan that has its own rules. So it's not going to happen. Like the language is incorrect, just because a court order says that, it will not happen. And I think that's the hardest part for everyone to understand, that you really have no recourse and you're almost at the mercy of the financial institution and their own rules when it comes to that, right? Or the plan.
Yeah, I think, and even the
Plan.
quadro preparers, right? You could take a divorce decree that says the same thing and give it to 10 different quadro preparers, and you might get
Yes.
10 different things back based on how they interpret that decree, or based on what they know, quite
Yeah.
honestly. For example, you have a 401k, right? And we need that
Mhm.
divided. Well, there are three requirements to divide a 401k. We need to know the valuation date. What date are we dividing this as of? Are we doing it as of today? Are we dividing it as of the date of divorce? And a lot of states too use the date of separation or the date of service as the date that
Yes. They
assets will
cut
be
off.
split. And so you think about that. There's going to be maybe months, even years between the date of separation or service and the date this 401k actually gets divided. So one of the first requirements of a quadro, how do we address those market fluctuations in between that period? If we want it divided as of the date of service, how do we address market fluctuations from that date of service a year ago until today? Often
Right.
it's left out of the decree, right? And that's the first thing as a quadro preparer. That's the first thing I need to know. If we're going to divide this in half, or for 25%, or we're going to award $200,000, should that include or exclude market fluctuations? Usually it's absent from the decree. Give that to
Yes.
any quadro preparer, and you don't know what you're going to get. He has to decide, or that quadro preparer has to decide, are we going to include or exclude market fluctuations on this now? Same thing with loans on the account, survivor benefits on pensions, often just completely left out of the decree. And you're putting these parties back in a position to result in unintended financial consequences if that's not the outcome, by pushing these things through, right? We draft the quadro without gains and losses, and we push it through, and then everybody finds out it didn't do what we
It didn't.
wanted later on, right? That happens all the
Right.
time. No, so I
No.
mean, when we talk about 401ks, and we talk about what needs to be in the decree, those are things, valuation date, market fluctuation language, loan language. Those are things that need to be discussed and negotiated before you even write your decree. We need to talk about those things so that we understand what's going to happen at the end, and we all are on the same page with the end result. That is another thing that comes to bite attorneys in the butt at the end of the day as well, is just a misunderstanding of what the end result should be, right? We may have done it all right, and we
Right.
may have done it according to that decree, but everybody wasn't understanding what the process might look like. Everybody wasn't understanding what the outcome is. Oh, they don't know that they're going to get an alternate payee account when we divide their 401k. Some of them think we're going to get a check in the mail, and where's my check, right?
Yes.
A lot of them don't
Yeah.
know, what the end result should look like. All of that should be known and understood before we even get into the decree.
And then let's not forget about, if you're dividing a 401k. So a lot of individuals, let's say you switch jobs, you had a 401k, you have usually the ability to leave the account with your old company. So not a lot of people roll over their own 401k. So you still have a 401k where there's not been any contributions made because it's part of another company, but it continues to grow or increase or decrease depending on the market. But I had a case where there was a very big issue because we divided it as of the day that, and this was in South Carolina, which is date of filing. That's the cutoff usually, unless you agree to something different. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember that we had a value. But and when everything was done, they take their sweet time in order to get the quadro to talk. And by the time they were going to divide it, there was less money in the account. But nobody had done anything wrong. It was just a market fluctuation. And the market went down. The account, they didn't have the same amount of money. And now we're dealing with the misunderstanding of the one party that that's the amount of money that they were supposed to get. So, by the way, if the division is 50-50, there's no loss, right? Everybody gets the same amount of money. Because if you divide it when the account had 200, everybody was getting 100. But if you divide it when it's 180, well, everybody gets 90. And everybody gets the same. But the problem is when those divisions happen and they are unequal. And you get, well, you're getting 60% of that account, or you're getting X amount of money from the account, or you get this percentage, but the percentage is lower. It just creates a lot of confusions too. And I think part of that is also not being able to explain individuals how that works. The market can go up and down. I had a case that the market went up and the spouse ended up getting a lot more money than we were original. But there was nothing we can do about that. It's called gains or losses, right? But
Mhm.
there's, you're going through a divorce. You don't want sometimes the other spouse to get more than X amount of money, or you feel that it's unfair. And the gains or losses seem unfair. And I feel like that is a conversation that should be had when you're drafting these documents, and say, hey, this number is not this number unless you say you're getting 150,000 from this account, period. Nothing
Correct.
else.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's not a number, like it stays still. It's an investment account, right? Within a retirement account.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that is an issue.
I think that's the
Yeah.
point, though. You have options. And so I see a lot of decrees or agreements that would say draft a quadro and award a fixed dollar amount. That's an option. You can
Mhm.
affix that dollar amount at a
Yes.
100,000, and that might be applicable to the circumstances of that case. They might have been in 3 days of negotiations to come around to a dollar amount that they need awarded versus a percentage. Now you can do both. You can award a dollar amount including or excluding gains and losses, or you can award a percentage including or excluding gains and losses. So you really have options to kind of fix that amount that you're going to receive or award, or you have the option to kind of have that amount fluctuate with the market and proportionately to the award amount that you would like, right?
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
you have options, and you brought up another good point at the very beginning there. You talked about 401ks and IRAs. A lot of folks are terminating employment, and they have the
Yes.
ability to roll
To
over
roll
a
it over.
401k into an IRA. And I think there's a big misunderstanding when we talk about 401ks versus IRAs and how to get them divided and what we can do with them in divorce. It's a big misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
And
I can get into that too if you'd like.
yeah, we need to get into that because and we have a case in common, right? That you're actually working with one of my clients right now. And we can get into that because I really want to talk about that and again, misinformation that is out there. But I want to also point out that because yeah, we can get into the details, qualified retirement account, no qualified retirement account. That is like a high level. We don't want, we want people to understand here. 401ks, IRAs, yes, they are retirement accounts. They're considered retirement accounts, but they have very different qualities and
Mhm.
they have to be divided differently. They work very differently within the financial world because of their particular characteristics. But there was a point in time back at 20 years ago when I started working in this world that dividing IRAs was even a little easier than it is now. I think that we have gotten a little bit complicated because there's a lot of, regulations and restrictions and things of that nature. And I do believe that there's also a problem there because of the tax implications potentially of dividing an IRA. The language has to be very specific, and I think we go back to the point of who are you talking to or getting the information from. And I think that's why someone like you that understands exactly how these accounts are supposed to work and be divided is very important. I know enough to be dangerous. I do not enjoy drafting quadros at all or trying to divide these accounts. I had, let's dive into my client. I was working with this client. They had an agreement. We were dividing several retirement accounts, right? I helped them with a few of them. They did, one was a quadro, one was another IRA. And then we ran into an issue with that particular IRA because of the financial institution, right? Whoever was holding this money. And our problem started that I didn't have enough information. And I believed at the time that the financial advisor, my client was working with a financial advisor, was given the wrong information. And I was a little hesitant to move forward, right? And I am just so glad I didn't. And I reached out to you, right? Because there was going to be a little bit of a disaster, if you will, at the end of the day, if we would have gone that route that she was being advised to go. So you want to talk a little bit about that, because that was very significant for me, even though I knew that there could be issues. This
Sure.
opened my eyes a little bit even more about this is not something that you want to just do or rush
Yeah.
into. Um, right?
Yeah, no, I think when you talk about dividing IRAs, the Quadro stuff, I think has muddied the waters in terms of dividing IRAs because, I just talked about gains and losses and valuation dates and loans. All of those things do not apply to an IRA. And so when you go to divide this IRA, or we're looking at dividing an IRA incident to divorce, it can be divided no different than a 401k as a non-taxable event. But those IRA custodians, the one in control of those funds, don't have the same requirements as a company or as a plan administrator would with a 401k, an employer sponsored plan. That's the key term there. They don't have the same responsibilities. And so when we look at dividing a 401k for by way of Quadro, we need to address valuation date, gains and losses, loans, and we need to we're expecting, and I guess it's part of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, that these
Right.
plan administrators make those calculations for us, and they automatically open up accounts for that 401k. It's all going to happen automatically based on the language in your Quadro. If you gave an IRA custodian a Quadro or language similar to what was in a Quadro, they don't have to make any of those calculations, and they won't. These IRA custodians will treat your request as if you're asking them to distribute funds from the IRA, no different than you or I wanted to go and call today and take a distribution. They need you to tell them what dollar amount or what percentage to take from this IRA today, right? And they want you to fill out the paperwork, and we're going to divide this, or we're going to take those dollars that you want as of today's date. And it takes a lot for everybody to kind of wrap their head around that idea, but that is the base of all of the issues when we divide IRAs. The Quadro, right? The Quadro stuff has kind of put into everybody's mind that we can divide the IRA as of the date of separation or as of the date of service. And we can't. If you want to do something like that, you have to do all of the calculations. You have to come up with a dollar amount as of that date. And guess what, right? That dollar amount is now fixed because these IRA custodians will not perform calculations and determine gains and losses for you. They want to know what to take out of this account today. When you ask me, what dollar amount should I be taking out of this account? And it just causes a lot of issues because, again, folks aren't ready for that. They're a year after their date of divorce, and now they're trying to divide their IRA, and it says 50% of that IRA. One of them thinks it's 50% as of the date of divorce, and the other one is sitting here going, I want 50% as of today, right? And so I think, again, the Quadro stuff kind of muddies the waters when it comes to dividing IRAs. When we divide IRAs, it's as simple as having a court order that identifies the IRA clearly, okay? And that could be your decree, that could be your marital agreement, just clearly identifying what we're dividing, and then using a award amount that is consistent with their forms. So they're going to have
Well,
distribution forms.
I
And
want to talk about that because that's the issue.
yeah,
Those distribution forms, they all have their own little books. Like
correct.
they do whatever they want the way they want it, and you are at their mercy in
Yes.
this situation, right?
It goes back to discovery, right? Same thing. We got to do the discovery on this IRA plan, and we got to know all of this before we put it into the decree. We got to know what those forms look like to be able to write up our decree with a dollar amount, or maybe we have to express it as a number of shares because we want all the fluctuations on this,
Right.
and the form doesn't allow us to do a percentage, right? The distribution form. So we
Right.
have to structure it using number of shares. And again, you wouldn't know any of this if you don't dig into it early during the negotiations right away.
Right. And a lot of time it's really hard to get that information.
Hmm.
Like there's some of these custodians that is you can reach out to them on the phone. There's nothing online because you have the big ones like the Fidelities, the Schwab. Yeah, you go online, you probably find their all forms, and then you kind of follow their procedures. A lot of
Hmm.
them don't have
Hmm.
that ability. We don't have that ability, right? And that's what happened with my client. Like there was nothing online, and you knew because you dealt with that particular custodian
Yeah.
before,
Yes.
but it's very hard for someone that doesn't deal with this every day or with that particular custodial that now every time I look at the IRAs for my clients, I'm like, oh my God, are they with them? Because I know that it's going to be a headache when we try to really make that division and make it happen for
Right.
everyone, right? Because we want that to happen. Everyone usually wants it to happen. Like, let's get this done. But if you don't have the information from them, that becomes very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And every one of them is going to require that form, that distribution or transfer form or withdrawal form. And then they also, on the other end, are going to require that receiving party to open up an account in their name. It doesn't
Right.
happen automatically, right? So for the custodian to be able to connect the dots for you, that receiving account has to be sitting there. And they're not just going to guess which account to put it in. You might need to give them a letter of instruction or letter of acceptance to identify which account to transfer that into. It just doesn't happen all automatically. But I think to your point there, the custodians, right? They have to use those forms and they have to report what you tell them to report. One of the biggest oversights on these forms is the Fidelities and the Schwabs. They have due to divorce transfer options right on these forms, and when you use those forms, you know that they're going to treat that as a non-taxable transfer. You might get
Yes.
distribution forms from ABC, a custodian, anybody out there that you can think of. You might get distribution forms that are don't have due to divorce options, and they just say withdrawal on them. They just say distribution on them without a proper decree and without other documents. You run the risk that this distribution form is going to get filed and reported as a taxable event to that current IRA owner. So that's kind of what happened with our client here, and then we're dealing with is
Yeah.
we got all the way to the custodian, and they wanted to just simply send the former spouse a check in the mail,
Yes.
which if we think about what that process would have looked like, they would have had, or they were having the account owner fill out a withdrawal or a distribution form,
Yes.
and they were going to report that as a taxable event at the end of the year. He was going to get a 1099. And I think again, the financial advisors, they jump in on these things. They don't understand where these folks are coming from. They don't understand the
Yes.
divorce process. They don't understand what these decrees are actually trying to do. If you have a decree that says divide this IRA in half plus gains and losses, and those that sort of language, well, the IRA custodians and your financial advisors are not equipped to understand and connect the dots and fill out those forms to be consistent with the decree. And so they're just going
Yeah.
and giving the former spouse 50% and not thinking about the consequences. And I
Right.
see I see that every day. I will tell you that happens more often than we know. And the parties that
Yeah.
are involved in that, they don't know it either. They don't know any better either. I can tell
No.
you there are IRA owners getting 1099s. They're paying the taxes on them at year end and they don't even know the difference.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that that is the biggest problem because you have individuals that, first of all, when they get to this point, they want to be done with this process. They're like, yes, let's just divide the money and let's all move on, right? Because it's not a fun process. And the problem is that the financial advisors that treat any transaction that is due to a divorce as a financial transaction, like a regular financial transaction. And I was a financial advisor, it is not the same.
Mhm.
And but you're right, people don't know that. Individuals don't know better. If you go to a financial advisor, they assume that this is why what we do is so important, like having the experts that actually understands how things work because of a divorce. Like, it's just, I repeat it all the time, everything you do is because of a divorce. It changes everything. The rules are all different. The IRS looks at everything differently when we do this. So I think the bottom line here is we need to make sure that the individuals out there know there's experts specifically for this. And we're not taking anything from the advisors that don't do this work. We're just trying to get these individuals to get to the point where they can move on, right? And then the advisors can actually do their work with the money that comes to them, but
Right.
without creating other issues. Because if they move forward with something like this, and then the one spouse gets a 1099 and they realize they had to pay taxes because of that money, well, that can create all kinds of other issues again, because
Mhm.
yes, it was done incorrectly. So where do you go? Like, who really pays for this? And creates all other issues. So that's why
Mhm.
I think this is so important. And that this is why I'm so glad that you are there, because again, I do this a little bit. I can be dangerous. I don't want that to be my expertise, but I think it's such an important topic, and it's not just about the individuals, it's about the attorneys, it's about the judges.
Hmm.
Because when you go to a trial, if you don't, I testify at a trial, and I had done the analysis. There are several 401ks, several IRAs. It was like so many accounts, different, both in both of their names. And I said, you know, let's not divide each of them, because the IRAs, their 401ks, let's just put them on in a pile. Let's try to do the least possible work so it's not costly, and then we don't try to deal with this muddy waters, right?
Hmm.
Including a pension that I never had the plan. I had no idea what's going to happen with that pension. To this
Hmm.
day, I don't know what's going to happen with the time comes, because the judge ruled that every single account is to be divided 50-50.
And that
So
happens more
then,
often than you think because folks can't agree. They can't get on the same page to get educated enough to understand those offset options. And it's not as easy as
yeah,
just slapping those retirement accounts on paper either, because you
no,
have to understand the tax effects. You have to understand the
no,
difference in how they pay out. You have to understand that that pension out of all of those retirement accounts is the elephant in the room. And that may be the one if you don't have
yes.
information to divide in half so that you know you get
Right.
half and
But what
half.
if you
But
can't divide it either? And then you
correct.
get there and there's an issue. Like,
Yeah.
that is, all of these decisions are being made without the information, basically. And
Right.
and
Right.
is a problem.
Yeah.
So I think we can talk about this all day.
Mhm.
But let's what will you tell the individuals that are listening to us that maybe starting the process or going through the process or getting ready
Yeah.
to go to court for a
Yeah.
trial or a mediation? What are the things that you will suggest they do? Who do they talk to? Or what are the things
Yeah.
that they're looking for? Like, what are the blind spots that nobody's paying attention to? Like,
Yeah.
give me three of those, and just for people to have, like,
Yeah.
10,000 level.
Every plan is required, every employer sponsored plan. So this excludes IRAs, but every employer sponsored plan is required to have written quadro procedures. And that's how I refer to them. And that's how I would refer to them when I'm talking to these companies. But they should have written quadro procedures. Now, some companies, smaller companies here and there, they don't. They don't have them written. And then they'll be scrambling when you start asking for that. But by law, they should have written quadro procedures. Most of them offer a model quadro and as well as a summary plan description. So it's an SPD for short. I call and I ask company administrators that for those three things on every case or every quadro that I prepare. You don't have to be involved in the party or the case. You don't have to be a participant in this plan. You can call that company and get those documents. And that's what I would suggest right away. If we've got a pension, if we've got a 401k, get those documents so that we're able to reference them. We're able to do some discovery. We know who the contacts are now at these plans and at the company. That would be the first thing. And to answer that question too, it's going to come down to doing this discovery work up front. I mean, every mistake I can trace back to not doing that
Yeah.
discovery work and the lack of language in your decree.
Yeah. Definitely not something that you can rush through, and you need the information. That's just key about that. And then
Yeah.
also, what to do with the information, because that's the other part of that. You can read that
Sure.
and then you're like, okay, what do we
To
do
that
now?
point, though, to that point, I would reach out and find quadro experts specifically. CDFAs are not all built the same when it comes to quadros as
Correct.
well. And so you are
Yeah.
looking for a quadro expert, I think. And to that point, I talked about model language. To
Yeah.
blindly use model language is one of the biggest no-nos I can give another quadro preparer or an expert or anybody out there trying to do quadros. Blindly using model language is a big no-no because those model orders and those quadros that the companies are giving you protect the company first. They don't protect the participant. They don't protect the alternate payee. They
Mm.
often leave out options that are available and they're streamlining them to what that plan wants to see, or oftentimes they're streamlining those quadros to specific state statutes, right? So in specific
Mm.
states or certain states, they might automatically or they might use coverage or fractions. They might use fractions to divide
Oh.
these pensions as of the date of retirement automatically, where here in Wisconsin or certain other states, they don't use coverage or fractions or not a lot, right? We don't use them. and the model quadros might be specifically designed for coverage fractions. And so you have to know enough to be able to work around model quadros. I use those as I use those to get an idea, to learn more about that plan and learn more about the options, knowing full well I don't have to put every word or fill in the blanks in that model quadro. And a lot of times, again,
Right.
I'm not using model quadros. So to that
Right.
point, you do, once you get that information, we still have to know what to do with it. And I
What
think
to do
that's
with
where you
it.
have to rely on your experts. You find the quadro experts if you need to. You rely on your attorney. You know, if you're going to your attorney and you're getting answers that aren't sufficient, if they don't know how to answer your questions about these particular plans, that's when maybe we do need to find a quadro expert or a retirement plan expert. But these attorneys should be there too to kind of guide you and start that
Right.
discovery process, start that negotiation now, start that understanding and education, and maybe you run into valuation issues on these things. You got to start that
Yeah.
early on. If your attorney's not doing those things for you early on, I think that's when the light bulb goes off. Hey, we should get somebody else in here, you know.
Yeah. And even if they do, sometimes I do feel attorneys are still concentrating on the law side of things because that's their expertise. And even if they read they don't, I don't think they get to see what financially the consequences will be
They don't see enough of it.
financially. They don't, right. So they're not really experts on the retirement accounts, how to retire them, even if it's because of a divorce, because it's literally a financial transaction, not
Right.
a legal
Right. It's a
transaction
legal
only.
document,
So,
the financial transaction. That's what I always say. It is a legal
yes,
document, but everything in it
but it's a
is
financial,
financial. You
yeah,
have to know numbers. You have to know the terms and conditions of every retirement account, right? Yeah.
I love that. Do you trademark that? Because I'm going to use it. Is a legal document, but is a financial transaction. I kind of like
Hmm.
it. I'm going to use
Hmm.
that. I think that's great. So, Gerard, when we need an expert that has to do with quadros or pensions, how do we find you?
Yeah, I have a website, Smarter Divorce Solutions, Wisconsin. There's a couple other locations out there. So Smarter Divorce Solutions, Wisconsin. My email address is my first name, Gerard, Gerard, at smarterdivorcesolutions.com. And you can find me by phone as well. Shoot me a call anytime. I'm always happy to answer questions and take calls. 888
Awesome.
203 7117.
Awesome. And we have all that in the show notes. And thank you, Gerard, for this conversation. Like I said, we could talk about this all day. I always learn a lot, and I'm really uh, happy that I have you as a resource for my clients because I know that what you do is super important. And everyone out there, I really hope that you got a little nugget today from this episode. I know we put a lot of information out there. Share this with someone that you think maybe find it useful, and join me next time for the Divorce and Money podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're going through a separation or divorce, please contact me through my website at everafterwealth.com. I would love to be a resource and partner as you navigate this season and prepare for your financial future. I'll see you in the next episode.